Welcome back, fifth graders, to Social Studies. Today we'll be talking about the federal and federalism. So for today's assignment, you should be able to define federalism and explain the division of power between states and the federal government. That sounds like a pretty wordy and big thing that we're going to be able to do, but really, we're just learning what federalism is and how and what the difference is between the federal government and what the state government is. So in the United States, we are one country made up of 50 states altogether. So we're one country with 50 separate states underneath it. We are a group of states that are united, hence the name United States. Pretty clever what they did there. But before we were the United States, we were the 13 colonies. So when our country was born, the 13 states or colonies already existed. They each had been a British colony before gaining independence from Britain after the Revolutionary War. So what that means is the first 13 colonies or states were a part of Britain. We were ruled by Britain. We were still under their government. But after the Revolutionary War, they were independent of Britain. But they wanted to come together as one nation, but remaining their independence because they knew what it was like to be ruled by a government that was unfair. So they wanted a government to unite the nation, but they also wanted to remain independent from that nation as well. So a goal was to have a central government that shared power with the states. So what that's saying is that each of the states wanted to have their own power and their own government, but they knew they needed a bigger government to govern all of the smaller governments. Like they needed an umbrella, and then they would be under the umbrella. So the solution was the United States Constitution, which we learned about a couple of weeks ago. And so this Constitution united all of the states, and it's under all, the umbrella is the Constitution, and the states are underneath it. So, for them to get together, each of the colonies already had its own government and court system. So that meant that each of those 13 colonies, they had their own government, they had their own people ruling, they had their own systems and laws and things in place for how their own state would work. But if they were to become a united nation, they needed a government that could speak for the whole nation. So that meant that Jamestown, one of the colonies, that wasn't going to be the government that spoke for everybody. They had their own government, and then they needed someone, a bigger person, to unite all of them and be in charge of all of them without also being in charge of them. It's kind of confusing how that worked out. So they wanted to create a central government. So that really just means they wanted a bigger government, kind of like in a school, there's the principal, and then underneath the principal are all the teachers. So in this back then, let's just say the 13 colonies, those were all 13 different teachers. So all those 13 teachers, they lived in Explorer Elementary. Let's say Explorer Elementary was the United States. So each of those 13 teachers, they have their own rules in their classroom, they have their own policies, they have different things they do. Each classroom is different, but they're all united in Explorer Elementary. And in order for them to know how to work together, and there's specific rules all teachers have, they have a unifying government, or the central government, which is our principal. So our principal would be the central government, and underneath the principal are the teachers, who would be our 13 colonies. So when they created the central government, this government would have the power to declare war on other countries, to run a military, negotiate treaties, and they would have federal courts to resolve problems. So the federal courts would be bigger than the courts that each state had. So, just to break it down a little bit more, there was government on two levels. The federal government, which is, let's say, our principal, they would deal with issues that affect the entire country. Or, if we were talking about relating it to school, the principal deals with issues that affect the entire school. Then there's the state government. Each state has its own government that only handles their state's issues. So Michigan has a state government that only handles the issues that affect Michigan. Arizona has its own government. New York, Texas, Louisiana, all these different places have their own government. So again, if we're relating this to school, the states would be the teachers. So each teacher has its own government or own rules that handle their own classroom issues. So in Michigan, we have our own government, and we have a governor which runs our government. So we said we would be able to understand the definition of federalism. Well, here it is, friends. The division of power between a central government and state governments. So what I'm explaining to you, because I'm saying that there's a bigger government and then each state has their own government, that division of power, the separation of power, that is federalism. The idea that there would be a central government or the principal, and then there would be state governments, the teachers, that division of power is called federalism. And so the word federal is a word that refers to the central government. So we would call our government or our principles of the United States the federal government. So to better understand what the federal government does for us, here's a little Venn diagram. So the federal powers are the powers given to the federal government. Remember, the federal government is like the big government. And then the state powers are powers given to the state. So there's an umbrella, remember, that the federal powers are over, and then there's the state powers underneath it. Or, for example, federal powers are the powers that the principal has. They have different responsibilities, they have different rules, and they're the ones there to enforce the rules over all the teachers or the states. And then the state powers are the teachers, and they have powers within their classroom or their state. Then there's this word concurrent. That's a weird word, concurrent. Concurrent means shared powers. Just like in our Venn diagram, you know how those circles overlap? So when the state powers and the federal powers overlap, right here are their shared powers. Lastly, here's just a little cheat sheet. It helps us better understand what powers the federal government has. So they have the power to collect taxes. Whenever people get paychecks, like, I get a paycheck to be a teacher, I pay taxes out of my paycheck. And our taxes go towards paying the nation's debt, they go towards military, and they go towards general welfare. The federal power has the ability to borrow money from other countries to help the United States. They have the ability to manage business with other countries. We do business all the time with different countries, so they have that power. They have the power to print money. The federal government is the only place where new money can be printed. That goes with the next one. They can punish for counterfeit money. It's illegal. It's a federal crime to print money. Like, say if someone figured out how to print money at home and they try to use it, that's illegal. It's counterfeit money. They have the power to establish post offices and road signs, to declare war, create and support armies, and maintain a navy. So they have a lot of really important responsibilities, the federal government. And so all of these powers are what the federal government does. And there's a lot more. These are just the big ones. And then the state underneath it benefits from these powers, but then the state has its own powers within it. So the main idea here for federalism is that it's the division of power between a central government and state governments. So remember, the federal government, if we were talking about it in school terms, is our principal. And then the state government would be our teachers. So federal, state each has their own government, but they all are under the federal government. So all the teachers have their own classroom, and they have their own rules, but they all have to listen to and answer to the federal government, which is our principals. So I appreciate you all paying attention here. This was a really important lesson, and I hope you are able to better learn what federalism is and the difference between our federal government and our state government. Thank you for watching.